Good morning, evening and afternoon everyone, and welcome to a new week. We are on Monday, this is January the 9th, and today in history marks the march of IZEN to a dentist to get his tooth cavity removed, finally ending 4 days of excruciating pain and very likely substance abuse to get through said pain, which likely has the thanks of his dear Dr. Mother, which very likely smuggled illegally a fair amount of painkillers from the hospital, which also likely caused the deaths of some of the patients in there, but now it's all for the better. Now IZEN is feeling much better, so we're also gonna get our beautiful features on camera soon and on stream tonight as well. Now, talking about what happens today, we went a couple of days ago through the balance tuning hotfixes that will go live this reset, so in a couple of days. What is also left to talk about that we haven't mentioned are the changes to classes and specs for patch 10.0.5. One of our first tiny content patches coming relatively soon. It should come out quite soon, in January at least. We don't have an exact date, but it's already on the PTR. The events of the trading post coming online in patch 10.0.5 are happening by the end of January and the start of February, so this patch should be relatively soon. And we do have some more balance tuning in there. The majority of which, we can say once again, the majority of which is going to be buffs rather than specs being nerfed. The first in line are the changes, or I should say the change to Balance Druid, because Astral Communion, in addition to its active effect of giving you a bunch of astral power instantly, also now increases your astral power by 20. So it could be quite good for stockpiling astral power, you know, for ramping up the damage before a burst window. What is worth pointing out before we start going through all of the other specs is that this will be quite the common practice of Blizzard. Astral Communion is not taken pretty much by any druid, regardless whether or not it's Mythic Plus or Raid type of talent setups. It's quite the underused talent, which seems to be, of course, the angle that Blizzard is going for in this round of tuning for the next patch. Aiming at quite some underplayed, underutilized talents in trying to make the talent trees for your specs more competitive. Have more of a chance to be taken as opposed to right now, where this talent, for example, of balance doesn't really see much play at all. Talking about talents and talking about not seeing play, Restoration Druid gets the same treatment. Restoration Druid gets an extension to its talent tree right down the right side for Nourish. So Nourish gets an extra choice node for Restoration Druid between Wild, Synthesis and Forest's Flow. The problem for this talent is less about how powerful it's gonna be and more about the fact that to get all of this, the average Resto Druid will have to take away 3 talent points from their build, as pretty much most of the Resto Druids are not taking Nourish. They are not even taking the improved clear casting talents before Nourish, so taking those two plus this new choice node will be 3 extra talent points they have to find to be able to put there. So even though the talent itself looks quite strong, it's gonna be unlikely to see the druids move en masse to this new setup for the spec. We then have further changes to Mistweaver, which was already one of the specs which received the more interesting changes to the talent tree from the current version, especially with the whole Sha themed abilities they were receiving, with Shaylun's gift they were receiving. Now they have received some changes to Shaylun's gift itself. Basically a whole bunch of the effects and benefits of Shaylun's gift are getting buffed across the board. Now you can benefit from more healing, now it costs less base mana, now you get more mastery triggers from the ability itself. You also get mastery triggered from Zen Pulse as well. You have Rising Mist now extending renewing mists applied by Rapid Diffusion. You have Vivify costing 10% less. You have Invoke Yulon, the Jade Serpent, now reducing the cost of Enveloping Mist by 50% instead of 33%. And also a pretty good change, Echoing Reverberation now only requires Enveloping Mist to trigger the additional Zen Pulse. Previously it required both Enveloping Mist and Renewing Mist, so it was quite clunky and quite slow to activate the second trigger of your new Dragonflight ability, Zempos, now it's going to be made much more simple to activate. So continued focus being given to Mistweaver Monk in the talent trees of 10.0.5. We have also seen buffs a couple of days ago when we looked at the hot fixes coming this reset. So Mistweaver is getting even more attention in 10.0.5. It's going to be interesting and perhaps depressing to see, after the lack of attention to the other healers in quite some need, like Discipline and Shaman in this week's hotfix, if they will also get no attention in this round of tuning coming in 10.0.5. Brewmaster Monk gets a good amount of buffs, even though it doesn't look like, it doesn't read like they're getting buffs. But first of all, Spirit of the Ox, a new talent, a new ability. Your Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick have a chance to summon a healing sphere. Healing spheres are a big portion of the healing, the self-healing of a Brewmaster Monk, so this one can be quite powerful. Stagger is now baseline, automatically learned. Quick Sip now purifies 5% of the damage delayed by Stagger instead of 2%. And then you have the unsuspecting buffs. Gift of the Ox, Graceful Exit, Quick Sip and Staggering Strikes all have a single talent point now, instead of 2. All of their effects have been doubled and they only require 1 talent now, which means, in very short, you now have 4 extra talent points as a Brewmaster Monk if you were taking these 4 talents before, because now you only have to spend 1 point in each instead of 2 points in each to gain the same buff, the same benefit you were gaining before. So it's a pretty significant buff for the spec to have way more talent points to spend elsewhere as a Brewmaster. Blizzard then continues the endeavor of buffing underplayed talents, because for Paladin there are a couple of changes to Holy. Tears Deliverance, healing is increased by 25%, and Avenging Crusader can now trigger and consume Divine Purpose. Now, this is of course because at the moment not a single Holy Paladin is going down the right side of the tree to pick up Tears Deliverance, and also not a single Holy Paladin is switching from Avenging Wrath to Avenging Crusader. So the 2 abilities are getting buffed in hopes to giving Holy Paladins a few more options in their talent trees. Pretty small but perhaps possibly significant change to Priest. There is a new talent to be put on the choice node with Vampiric Embrace. Sanguine Teachings increases the leech by 3%. Also, the follow-up talent, the improvement of Vampiric Embrace talent, Sun Lane, now also gives you 2% additional leech. So TLDR, if you take those 2 talents now, you can get 5% leech as a priest. Not only is it okay for self-sustain, it's also of course massive for healers, because healers value leech by quite a lot. Obviously, also these sets of talents in particular for healers are never taken, not for Holy and not for Discipline. So if you want to go and grab this juicy 5% leech now as a priest healer, you have to start changing your talent pathing a little bit more to be able to grab these 2 talents down the right side of the tree for priest. Absolutely shocked and flabbergasted there isn't our usual wall of text for Shadow Priest. Oh well, anyway, we have Rogue. So Rogue gets a decent amount of changes. The class tree of Rogue gets Feint now baseline for all Rogue abilities, and Elusiveness, Cheat Death, Choice Node is going to be dragged up to row 2, where Feint used to be. The new talent which replaced the choice node between Elusiveness and Cheat Death is Unbreakable Stride, reducing the duration of movement slowing effects by 30%. Sepsis now grants 1 use of a stealth ability immediately, in addition to all of its previous effects. Sepsis is also not too much of a taken talent at the moment for rogue specs. The main changes happen to Assassination, even though all 3 specs of rogues are getting changed. Kingsbane has moved now and shares a location, shares a choice node with Dragon Tempered Blades. In place of Kingsbane, you have a new talent, Arterial Precision. Shiv strikes 4 additional nearby enemies and increases your bleed damage done to them by 20%. Lastly, Dashing Scoundrel now costs 2 talent points instead of 3. This will be quite a juicy set of options for Assassination Rogues, because at the moment the raid build used to go down the middle for the second poison to apply to your weapons, and the Mythic Plus build went to the sides to take Indiscriminate Carnage, of course, the god of Mythic Plus big pulls, and then Kingsbane. With the new talents in 10.0.5, now Kingsbane is right down the middle, no longer to the left. So it will be interesting to see the choices and options of Assassination Rogues and how they will go for. Likely, they will stick to going down the middle for the raid and going down the sides for Mythic Plus because of the new talent, Arterial Precision being very good, of course, in Mythic Plus, hitting 5 different targets, being quite good in AoE. Now, I mentioned once again all of these changes being generally old buffs. Just like a couple of days ago, there was only one nerf, and that was to Outlaw. Today, we are on the same path, because the only nerf is to Outlaw. Fan the Hammer's additional pistol shots now generate 1 fewer combo points. Now, this is the new style of Outlaw. Outlaw no longer spams Sinister Strike, no longer spams their normal generator to do a lot of the damage and to generate a lot of the combo points. Now they do much more with pistol shots, as you see here by the casts and by the procs of their talent Opportunity. So it's not as much as losing the damage of the ability that gets nerfed. What gets nerfed is the combo point generation. As you see here, Opportunity proccing multiple instances of pistol shot is the leader of combo points generated by an Outlaw rogue. So this will reduce a good amount, a decent amount of combo point generation from Outlaw. We then have extra help to Subtlety, once again to a talent which doesn't really get picked. Invigorating Shadow Dust now reduces affected cooldowns by 15 to 30 seconds instead of 10 to 20 seconds. So increase by 50% in power. Shaman, of course, finally we have some changes to Elemental and to Restoration Shaman. Mana Spring Totem has been renamed to Mana Spring, and its effect is now a passive effect. Moving on past this groundbreaking Shaman change, we have Warlock, where the focus of the changes is on Destruction. The changes here are quite confusing. Essentially, we are adding Shadowburn to 3 already existing talent effects. So, Ashen Remains, previously working with Chaos Bolt and Incinerate, Eradication, previously working with Chaos Bolt, and Burn to Ashes, previously working with Chaos Bolt and Rain of Fire, now also works with Shadowburn. So more incentives, more power-ups given to a not too popular talent at the moment for Destruction, like Shadowburn. We then finish with Warrior. So at this point we have gone through all of the other classes, and our initial question of the further changes to healers after seeing the changes to Mistweaver comes to an end. No, there are no more changes to the already forgotten Discipline and the already forgotten Restoration Shaman in patch 10.0.5 so far in this new round of tuning. So, finishing with Warrior, Arms gets an extra second to their improved sweeping strikes. Now you also get a new talent, Strength in Arms. Overpower has a 10% increased crit chance, and on enemies below 35% health, Overpower generates 8 rage. So, even more scaling and even more power in execute range given to Arms Warriors. Fatal Mark duration now is 2 minutes instead of 1, and Storm of Swords causes Whirlwind to cost 20 more rage instead of 30. So overall, across the board, buff to Arms Warriors. Lastly, we have more buffs to Fury, also once again more in line with the philosophy of buffing talents which are not currently played that much. As you can see, across these talents, not many of these are particularly popular for Fury. There are quite some significant changes to some of the less played talents like Unbridled Ferocity and Anger Management. Unbridled Ferocity has Onslaught now trigger not just 4 seconds of Rampage, but also 4 seconds of Recklessness, which is very, very good. Same for Anger Management, now you also get the cooldown reduction applied to Ravager as well. Once again, the reasoning from Blizzard on these type of changes is because they are not too popular, too powerful. So it's true for Fury Warrior, and it's also true for many of the other specs. These are not buffs in and of itself. Imagine at the moment many of these specs are performing at a power of 10, and Blizzard is trying to buff the talents which are currently performing at a power of 7 or 6 or 8. So perhaps after these buffs their power will grow from 8 to 9.5, from 6 to 8, from 7 to 9.2, but perhaps won't still break the 10 level power that these current specs are already playing at. So even if these are buffs, they still won't end up being utilized because they still won't empower these underplayed talents enough. So that's what I mean. Just because we see a whole bunch of positive changes to several of the specs, don't expect these specs to just naturally become stronger with patch 10.0.5, because maybe many of these buffs are essentially going to be wasted, are essentially going to go to talents and to passive effects not even being taken, not even being used by many of these specs. That's the point I'm trying to make at the end of the recap of these changes coming in patch 10.0.5. As I said, to close, the biggest sadness is the lack of any further tuning to the healer specs, and also the lack of any further tuning to the tank specs at the moment. We have seen, however, that in the first chunk of 10.0.5 changes, we do have at the very least a few changes here and there, for example to Guardian Druid being one of the tanks being given some attention. Still, doesn't seem like it's that much when it comes to balance, given the current situation and the current power level of tanks in particular. So we will see how this progresses and how keen Blizzard is in continuing to push around changes before the release of this patch. But for today, we are stopping here. As usual, we start our goodbyes by thanking all of my Patreon supporters for contributing and helping the growth of this channel. You can support, of course, in other ways, which include liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel. These are free ways to show your support and are still perfectly fine. You can also follow me on Twitter, that would help as well, and it would allow you to be notified on whenever I go live on stream or to hear any of the important news I have to dish out to all of my viewers. And of course, talking about the stream, I go live on Twitch nowadays from 10 PM Central European times, 1 PM Pacific and 4 PM Eastern US time zones. With this out of the way, we are now leaving each other at the start of this week. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, finally, after days of having a scarf tied around my chin with a hand warmer pocket pushing on my cheek to push the pain away, failed on painkillers, now it's all gone, finally.